Hey, today's blog that I'm reading out loud to you is called How to Start Forgiving Somebody. So, a story that I've told many times out loud and in my mind was about how I got majorly screwed over by my ex. So, the story was about how he left me the day that I left my job, that I lost my house and had to sell most of my belongings. And it seemed like everything was happening to me. And I felt like I had no control. The year 2015 was certainly my year of being lost. No full-time job, the end of a second marriage, and the loss of the family home. It seemed like way more than I could bear. So that year, my mind was in a constant spin about how I couldn't have rational conversations with my ex. Basically, he was a piece of shit, and I couldn't believe the things that he said and the things that he did. I was shocked, horrified, and disappointed. And sometimes, oh, believe me, I felt rage and hatred. And of course, I felt hurt and fear. And then about a year ago, I started to work on changing my mind about my ex. So I started to wiggle the thoughts that I had about him. And the first glimmers of compassion and forgiveness were kind of starting to find their way into my mind. I knew lots of self-help. I was raised, Catholic, and I was a life coach. And so I knew it was in my best interest to start the path to forgiveness. I knew that even if he still hates my guts, I don't have to hate his. So the first thing I did was I let myself ponder what it must be like to be him. And I would have said that he's an alcoholic. I realized his actual drinking didn't actually hurt me at all. He wasn't mean when he drank, and he, kept his job just fine. I realized the problem was the why of his drinking. So he drank for a reason. And I started having compassion for how he must have felt. I supposed a person who drank a lot must be trying to escape lots of shitty thoughts and feelings, mostly about himself. Then I also realized that I wasn't the victim. And that meant he wasn't the villain. So, for example, I lost my house because of the divorce, but I realized that just using that word lost was not helping me. I was creating my own victimhood. So I owned the fact that I didn't stay married to him. And the consequence of that was the house had to be sold. So just by wiggling that word lost really helped a lot. I was able to regain some control of my life by just changing how I spoke to myself about it. So now I just said, occasionally I'll catch myself saying lost, and I go, wait. The house had to be sold. I also tried to take his perspective. So I used empathy and saw how crappy it must have been to be married to me, because I was always monitoring his nicotine, sugar, alcohol. I was way too critical. Now I realize it was all about me and my own self-loathing. It was so easy for me to judge him harshly because I'm super critical about my own addictions. I used to love to smoke. Like, seriously, back when I smoked, I would have said, like, just put a cigarette in every orifice of my body, and I'd go, yeah, not anymore, but I used to love smoking, and I'm still addicted to sugar. And back when I was married to him, I'd see him giving into urges for alcohol, sugar, nicotine, whatever, and I would hate him for it. Meanwhile, I was really just hating myself about doing the same thing. You may have heard the quote from Carl Jung that says, everything that irritates us about others can lead to an understanding of ourselves. So I recently had a few more mind wiggles when it came to my ex. So right now I'm reading a book by Marianne Williamson called A Return to Love, and it's opening my eyes even more. I'm letting myself have a different conversation in my head. I'm praying to see things in a new way. So in the book, she says that we either operate out of love or out of fear, with fear being the absence of love. So I started looking at the biggest fights that I had with my ex. My ex acted in an unloving way because of fear, and then I did the same thing. So our big fights usually involved other men. I got in trouble for commenting on posts made by an ex-boyfriend. I got accused of being a bad wife because once when he was out of town, I went out with some other men and women, and he would tell me how disrespectful I was for sharing a story from a past relationship. That happened numerous times. And then my fear showed up as a reaction. So I got defensive and held my ground. I thought there was no way I was going to act differently just because he was so insecure and jealous. My response revealed my own fears. The real me isn't okay. I've done something wrong or I picked the wrong man. I was not able to see that he was acting from fear. I just thought he was being a total asshole. So now I wonder about why he acted in an unloving way. Maybe his fears were about losing me or that he wasn't good enough in some way. Also, after we'd been split for a while, I found out he'd been cheating on me. So maybe he had fearful thoughts about me because of what he was doing secretly. So now I let myself go back to those fights in my mind's eye. And I wonder how things would have gone different if I had listened in a different way. What would, like, what if I imagined a scared child instead of a grown man? My guess is I wouldn't have been so defensive. Author Byron Katie says, as soon as we get defensive, we've started a war. So maybe if I would have dropped the rope during our tug of war, things would have been more peaceful. So looking back, my ex revealed his fearful moments about himself in bits and pieces. I just let myself get frustrated because I knew I couldn't fix him because I thought I should have been able to fix him. So the lesson I have for myself now is that I can replay those fights in my mind and I don't have to make him the villain. I don't have to be the victim. I can look at his actions and ask myself if he was being unloving. If the answer is yes, then I can look at it in a new way. I can look at him with compassion instead of anger or superiority. I can see his wounds like I see mine and try to have empathy. So looking at the past, I'm not beating myself up, but instead, I hope to use this new outlook to change things now. Feeling loving thoughts about him helps me no matter what he thinks about me. Quite simply, I just didn't understand any of this stuff at the time that we were married, so now I know better and I can do better. So think of somebody in your life who you'd like to forgive because you know it will be better for you. See if you can wiggle your thoughts about their actions just a little. See if you can find their wound, their fear, and ask God, Jesus, the Spirit, Mother Nature, whoever, to help you see it in a new way. Just keep asking, and soon you'll be able to wiggle it just a little bit. Yeah, I said it. Until next time.